Central Bank of Nigeria holds interest rate at 11.5%, other parameters constant. Nigerian Economic Summit Group calls on the federal government to fast-track policies that will drive economic growth. Asia stocks trade mix as investors look ahead of Fed meeting conclusion. Plus, oil dips on profit-taking ahead of Fed update. The program is Business Express, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Benny Adams, your guide. Good to have you join us on the business side of life. And we start by telling you that the national policy on fifth generation network for Nigeria's digital economy has been launched by President Muhammadu Buhari. Presenting the documents to the public, the president directed all the nation's security institutions to immediately leverage the new technologies when deployed to beef up national security.
A number of benefits that can support virtually every sector of our economy. For instance, it can enhance connectivity, improve healthcare, support education, foster smart cities, and boost agriculture, among other advantages that it gives. It will also support security institutions and play a key role in boosting our efforts towards enhancing security across the nation.
A successful 5G deployment globally will increase the global economic output by 12.6 trillion USD. It is because of this, Your Excellency, we feel that if we are proactive in Nigeria, we will be able to dominate at least the African market. 5G deployment could be the biggest revolution for our security institutions to make their work more effective. It will allow them to perform some security operations virtually without exposing personalities to the challenge physically. The same when it comes to transparency. It will support our administration in fighting corruption and corrupt practices.
Another good news is that Nigeria's macroeconomic environment looks positive and can be prosperous if the right reforms are effectively implemented. This is part of submissions at the 2022 Nigerian Economic Summit Group Outlook, launched in Abuja. It is titled The Last Mile. International financial institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund have predicted Nigeria's economy to grow by 2.8% and 2.9% in 2022. For this to happen, the Nigeria Economic Summit Group is of the view that there must be urgent reforms towards significant improvement in the national economic outcomes, where the organizers suggest a stand on subsidy. While the outlook supports fuel subsidy removal for economic growth, it recommends a gradual phasing out of the subsidy and implementation of efficient social interventions to cushion the effect of the removal. Address inefficiencies in the oil and gas sector, in addition to dealing with the shortage of foreign exchange, among other sector reforms, which should be geared towards intensifying efforts at improving revenue.
These issues, if properly dealt with, have immense capacity to propel economic growth, enable employment, reduce poverty, and start us on a new path to sustained development.
The framework must be clear. How we do to bring investment must be clear. What we do with the implementers of the plan is very critical, especially the civil service.
In the view of the Senate leadership, the federal government is doing a lot in improving revenue sources.
536 billion. But the government succeeded in bringing in about 1.4 trillion naira. That is a massive improvement.
The document, titled The Last Mile, explores 3 scenarios of business as usual, best case scenario, and the worst case scenario. The best case scenario assumptions pegs crude oil price at $75 per barrel, crude production to average 2.0 million barrels per day, and capital expenditure at 4.05 trillion naira, in addition to real GDP expanding by 3.2%. And to get more perspective on the Nigeria Economic Summit Group Macroeconomic Outlook for 2022, titled The Last Mile, I have with me Chief Executive Officer Laoye Jayola. You are welcome to Business Express.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Well, we've been on it and we are continuing at this point. Take us through the 2022 outlook and how can it shape the economy?
Well, again, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. And generally, we identified what are the things we feel are key drivers that will have impact on the economy in 2022. And on the light of that, we were able to again use our macroeconomic model to mirror possible outcomes in 2022. And that gave us, that enabled us to do 3 scenario analysis, looking at the worst case, the best case, and business as usual. And like you did point out in the process of, in the precursor to this interview, one of the things we then found out is that depending on what we do, the GDP is expected to grow between 2.7 to 3.2. 3.2 if we take all the actions. But what we then did was specifically to then say, you know what, this is the last full year, the 2022 is the last full year that the government will have to actually implement all the plans and programs that they have for the citizenry. Because by the time we get to 2023, we only have 5 months left. In order to finish strong, now to ensure that whatever it is that the government is promised the citizens, a couple of things need to be done. And that's what we call the last mile. But it's not only for government again to know what is it we think should be done to fast track and to hasten the fulfillment of these objectives and of these plans. We again decided to bring it to fore, and that's what we implore to all of us, civil society and media, to ensure that even those that aspire to lead us, whether they be at a federal or state or the local government level, should be made to be aware of the position we face as a nation, and therefore be subjected to some kind of a rigor for them coming out to tell us what is it you want to do to make sure you better the lot of the people. There's no doubt that we've ended up in the economy in a situation where we have an inflation that is about 15%. It's more than that when we look at food inflation. That we have a situation where we have a huge debt position, where our debt is mounting up. And one of the major problems for this is revenue, which I would believe that government need to work on revenue. And one area we feel we can work on revenue will be making the environment of some sectors far attractive to generate revenue, one, and then again enhancing whatever it is we're doing around ease of doing business to ensure that we can attract investment. And we made it very clear that macroeconomic stability is very, very crucial. Again, in the outlook, we try to throw ourselves a hat in the ring when it came to the issue of subsidy. What we pointed out very clearly was, you know what, when subsidy started, it was intended to be a short-term palliative.
Sure.
Palliative in such a way until we're able to resolve some of those bottlenecks that we'll face. And it has become something that everybody that comes is afraid to remove. It's not only this government, even the government before is afraid to remove. And from our perspective, once we recognize the fact that the times are hard because of COVID and because of all the things we've gone through, many people are hurting. Removing subsidy now will be such that will have greater impact on the people. But then, however, whenever they remove it, we give them some 5 conditions we think they should look at.
Okay,
Particularly, how do we take care?
before we come into those conditions which you had
Okay.
suggested to be implemented as a gradual phase out, the projections for 2022 is driven by both external development and domestic economic conditions. What is the best case scenario, considering your stand also on the fuel subsidy?
You see, first thing I've talked about is that, look, whether we like it or not, oil still remain our major revenue earner as a nation. And whatever we get from oil feeds into what we spend. And unfortunately, we've not been able to meet the total, we've not been able to meet what is our OPEC quota because of, again, insecurity around the Niger Delta area. A number of the people who are who are responsible for making production have had to face unfazed major because again they are losing the crude oil, not in small measures. I mean, if you sit with operators in that area, they will tell you how much they are losing. Unfortunately, we haven't done much to monitor and to reduce the impact of this crude oil theft. Now, the consequence of that is that even when we have projected that, we'll do 1.8, 1.9, 2 billion barrels per day, we're doing significantly lower than that. And the implication, therefore, is that whatever amount we say we're going to weigh by way of price, and if the quantity is low, it means that the net expected revenue is poor. So what we have said, therefore, is that there's a need to look at the oil sector very, very well. Because we projected that if we can sell at $75 per barrel, all through the year, currently it's doing about 80, but you see up and down, up and down. If we can do that all through the year, and we can then successfully produce 2 million barrel per day, what we are going to face, therefore, is that we will have enough money that can enable us to make as much as over 3.5 trillion available for capital expenditure. Those are the things we believe will have. The implication of this is that it will reduce inflation and it will ensure that there is available effects in the market for it to take up other areas. So what we see, therefore, is that we won't see a wide divide between the parallel market and the IRE window because there'll be enough supply. So those are the conditions that we put in place. Of course,
Okay,
for this
okay,
to
still
work,
still talking
we
about
instead
still talking about these conditions as it is now, talking about the reforms in the oil sector. Government have suspended the removal of the subsidy. Another issue that is pending is also shortage of foreign exchange. What are the likely implications on the economy presently and moving forward?
You see, I'm careful again. For us, you see, one of the things we cannot run away from is the fact that our revenues are poor.
Sure.
Because our revenues are poor, and we're not looking at how to plug leakages to rein in sufficient revenue, we have been borrowing. We have been borrowing. We have been putting pressure on the central bank and borrowing locally, to the extent that our deficit is huge. And in servicing this borrowing, we're spending about, last year we spent 78% of our revenue on servicing debt. That is despite the fact that the CBN is suppressing the local domestic rates, which is a major reason why, one of the reasons why you see problem with FX. Because like we did say yesterday, if I'm supposed to store my money in Naira, And for one reason or the other, I am making losses from day one. And let me explain what I mean making losses. If I put money in today, and for one reason or the other, I am not getting enough interest, and the interest is by far lower than the inflation rate, what I face is that I'm not encouraged to save in Naira. And what people are doing because of that is that they are looking at investing in dollar. That's why we're saying we need to interrogate, is Naira really a good store of value? Because of the one you lose money.
Okay, with all of this.
And I'm making think about, that's why for me, macroeconomic stability is a major issue that government will have. We have challenged with inflation, we have challenged with exchange rate, we have challenged with interest rate.
Okay, with all of this in perspective, the CBN have maintained the MPC rate. Then we're talking about how else can we also improve the investment environment to attract foreign investment?
You know, sometimes I don't pity the central bank. The central bank have its fault, and no doubt about it, they have their faults. But again, these things are we need monetary policy, we need fiscal policy, we need trade policy to do it. One of the trade policies one of the fiscal policy and we need to do is how to manage even the revenue we have. And currently, we are throwing it out by way of subsidy. And you were there yesterday when we analyzed the subsidy, and we said that while Mr. President wants to protect the poor, it is not the poor that are benefiting the stocks on this. That's one. A lot of the subsidy goes to people we import. So I can import fuel into this country, put them inside the lagoon, and yet make my subsidy. We must rethink how we compensate and feed people for subsidy. The other thing, of course, is that where will investors come? If I'm an investor and I'm coming in with, for instance, my dollar, I bring a capital importation today, you take it at a rate, maybe the IE window rate. Tomorrow there is a devaluation. Even without doing business, I have lost. Again, I face a number of issues around doing business. Security matter. I've just told you one area around our oil and gas sector. There's huge security issues around that. There are leakages. There are people that are waiting to ensure that they then bring in money. But again, they can't even take the oil out.
So the watchword here is that all Nigerians must put hands on deck to ensure that patriotism is a watchword for us to move our economy in the last mile. Thank you so very much, CEO NESG Jayola Laoye. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And moving on, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank has again retained monetary policy rates and all parameters to allow sustained recovery. Reading the communique of the first meeting of the year in Abuja, Governor Godwin Emefiele identified inflation as one of the reasons for the committee's decision to maintain stance. Liakatung Babatunde has more on that.
It is the first meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee for the year 2022. Predictions were that Nigeria will tighten policy rates, but that was not to be. Governor of the Apex Bank, Godwin Emefiele, points out the need to appraise the implications of unfolding global developments around policy tapering and normalization by advanced economies.
Those countries that are raising rates, or even if there are some emerging markets that are following them by raising rates, those economies are indeed facing pressure because they will, if they are not already, facing capital flow reversals from their economy. So we are not in that game, and that is why we are not following them in that direction.
The committee believed that the existing monetary policy stance has supported the growth recovery and should be allowed to continue for a little longer for consolidation to achieve the MPC's mandate of price stability that is conducive for sustainable growth. The committee acknowledged the success of interventions across sectors of the economy by the bank, with Emefiele confident that food prices will be controlled through fiscal and monetary measures.
We will continue to aggregate those rice paddies and we will sell them to millers, and we would like to appeal to the millers that they should also be considerate. We're going to look at every transportation logistics that they're looking at, but Nigerians must receive rice on their plate, in their dining tables or in their dining rooms at moderate prices.
The governor also disclosed that the bank is working to make the e-Naira transaction process easier, and already the NCC has approved 997 as the code for transaction for those without Android phones, not to be left out. On fuel subsidy, MPC suggests a robust engagement with stakeholders to ensure a smooth process. In Abuja, Leah Baba today.
The International Monetary Fund has retained its 2022 growth forecast for Nigeria at 2.7% and increased 2023 projection by 0.1% to 2.7%. The IMF had in its October report last year projected a 2.7% growth rate for 2022 and 2.6% for 2023. In its January World Economic Outlook report released on Tuesday, the IMF downgraded its growth forecast for sub-Saharan Africa to 3.7% and 4.0% for 2022 and 2023 from 3.6% and 3.9% forecast in its October 2021 World Economic Outlook report. The IMF also reduced its forecast for global economic growth to 4.4% in 2023, representing 0.5 percentage points lower than the 4.9% projected in October. IMF says the decline will be triggered majorly by the COVID-19 variant spread and inflation. The Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment has engaged the services of independent service providers to assist in revenue generation through certification of equipment used for trade in the country. Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Adeni Adebayo, disclosed this at the inauguration of operational vehicles for weight and measures in Abuja. The report. Ensuring that the public gets value for money in every transaction they undertake is the duty of weight and measures. This they do through the instrument of legal metrology. This action by the minister is to ensure service delivery is efficient, as the Weight and Measures Department of the ministry is set to beam its searchlights into activities in telecommunication, power, banking, water and transportation sectors of the economy, with a view to guarantee standards and raising additional revenue through fees charged for verification and certification of equipment used for trade.
Government expects you to go out in full force to carry out your statutory functions. We expect you to surpass the sum of 805 million naira generated in 2021 to hit the 1.5 billion naira mark in 2022.
And that is why he has gone ahead to commission ISPS and IDSP to work in concert with officials of the department to ensure that application of legal methodology in all aspects of Nigerian economy is enforced. In doing that, it's going to ensure fairness, accuracy, and will not ensure that customers are not shortchanged.
The 14 vehicles were dispatched for use across the country. In a remarkable run, stocks on the Nigerian exchange sprang in reaction to fresh investor confidence as two Nigerian businessmen, Aliko Dangote and Abdul Samad Rabiu, appear formidable in Africa on Forbes' list released this week. The all-share index went all the way up to 46,529.99 points in midweek trade as investors traded almost 329 million shares in 4,219 deals valued at 4.817 billion naira. Equity capitalization ended the session at 25.073 trillion naira. Multiverse, mutual benefits and guarantee topped the activity chart. Next is the global market.
Global stocks edged up Wednesday ahead of the outcome of the Federal Reserve's policy meeting, while oil rose towards recent 7-year highs on tension between Russia and Ukraine. In Europe, stocks rose as all sectors entered into positive territory. The positive trade comes after markets in the region closed higher on Tuesday, recouping some losses from Monday's sell-off. Germany's DAX advanced 2.13% to close at 15,446.75. London's FTSE also added 1.77%, while France's CAC 40 was up by 2.05%. In Africa, the bears dominated the market this Wednesday after a mixed trading session the previous day. Kenya's Nairobi oil share was down by 1.33%. Tunisia's Tunidex was also down by 0.31%, while Ghana's GSE Composite declined 0.15%. And that's Global Market Review. I am Neka Oko. It's back to you, Benny.
Business Express returns tomorrow at 9:30.